Most buyers never tell you where you lost them. They sit through your demo, read your proposal, take your follow-up call, and then they go quiet. And somewhere in your sales process, that deal gets marked as lost to a competitor or no decision. But the truth is usually simpler, and it's harder to hear. The process broke down somewhere, and nobody on your team saw it coming, because your buyers have a seat at every meeting you will never be invited to. The outside seat sits in that seat. I'm Mike Tumalty, founder of Inside Now, where we go through your commercial funnel as a real buyer and tell you exactly what we find. I'm also the host of the Outside Seat podcast, where I bring that conversation to the people who can actually do something about it. Every week, 2 strands. The GTM leaders talking strategy, and then the unsung heroes talking reality. Brought to you by Flourish, the GTM talent partner that connects hiring, development, and performance in sales, in life. Now to today's show. Welcome to this week's episode of The Outside Seat. I am thrilled and delighted to be joined today by Ted. Ted is one of the foremost leaders when it comes to customer success, customer support. He's very modest in what he will be saying. We had a really good run together in a previous company. And Ted, I'm so thrilled that you've agreed to come and share your wisdom with the audience today.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the kind words, and I feel the same. I enjoyed our time together a great deal, and appreciate the opportunity to do this.
Why don't you give everybody a little bit of a 2 cents of what you're doing now, and maybe a little bit of your history to get to this point?
I'm currently the Chief Customer Officer at a company called MoveMedical, and we serve the medical device industry, specifically in helping them to manage their last mile of their supply chain. So it's a very complex business need where, there's all kinds of inventory, very expensive inventory that needs to get in and out of hospitals. There's, reverse logistics involved. There's a need to, make sure that these companies are not, losing their inventory or that it's going obsolete. They need to have a clear view into where everything is and be able to get it in the hands of surgeons for surgeries. So it's a really interesting work. I've been here a little more than a year and a half. Actually, a little under a year and a half. This has been an interesting place for me to land. It's we work with very, very large contracts. It's not a volume business at all. We have about 20 customers, but they're all very, very large contracts. And I enjoy it because I've always really enjoyed the big enterprise type engagements that are really high touch, and you've got to put a lot into it. You've got to spend a lot of time on managing customer success. You've got to spend a lot of time on, making sure customers are getting the ROI. So, but, throughout my career, I've been doing this kind of work for over 25 years. I haven't really stuck to one industry. I've spent some time in, the HR space, in pharma space, and I was in the hospitality ERP for a while. I actually like learning new industries and applying my craft to that. So this has been a really good way to take what I've learned over the years and really focus it very strongly on like these elite customer engagements that we have. Because, in the past I've had, usually there'll be, I might have hundreds of customers and maybe 2 or 3 of them are very large. Here, it's like everybody's huge. There's a very, very strong directive to, never lose a customer. So the pressure is higher, but there's also an opportunity based on the investment that these customers are making to really make a difference in what they're doing, how they're adopting stuff.
Awesome. So there's so much to unpack there, which is really interesting, the perspective that you've come from with lots of different industries, and I'm going to touch on that in a moment. But if we look at high touch versus that volume play, and you've got 20 customers that you've got this high touch methodology for, what are the differences between high touch and volume, specifically from the CCO seat, where you have that perspective? What's the day-to-day managing 20 versus day-to-day of managing 2,000, 3,000?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. So it's really about, I'm actively involved in all of them. So, in a landscape where there are, hundreds or thousands of customers, it's very, you operationalize it, you put it in motion, you look at a lot more data, you look at a lot more signals across, a broad set. and then you kind of interrogate your soft spots that you see. Here it's, frankly, it's almost a little more manual, because it is like I'm talking to my CSMs, my key account directors, every day to understand where we're at with these customers. I have relationships with the customers myself. The other thing that's been interesting is, there is, because these are multi-million dollar contracts, everyone is very interested in the state of them. So, our board, our CEO, everyone's really involved, and I need to leverage them. So, I'm more used to environments where, I'm the guy, I own it. Here's my large group of customers, and I've got my arms around the whole thing, and I'll let the rest of, I'll let my stakeholders internally know where we've got some trouble or where we're working on some things. But here it's like, it's more of a regular reporting on absolutely all of them and what we're doing about all of them, and knowing each of them in intimate detail. So it's a very much a team approach. And quite honestly, I had to adjust for my own ego as I came into that a little bit, because I'm not used to having to answer for everything that's going on within the customer base, because it's just always been my gig and my thing. But when there are only 20 customers, it is reasonable that I can report out on every single one of them. So in a way, it's a little less. I mean, we do a lot with data. We're certainly looking at a lot of data and what we can see in how we're working with the customers and the signals that it's creating. But we end up taking it to the next level where, it's not just like, okay, go execute your playbook, Mr. and Mrs. CSM, and I'm going to trust that
Yeah.
you're doing it and have you report back to me. I'm in the room. I'm in the meeting. I'm coming to everything. We do QBRs with all these clients, and we've got, 2, 3, 4 members of our executive team all the time involved in them. So it's more of being like the conductor across all of the different resources that we have in every aspect of managing the
That's awesome. So
relationship.
one of the things that you look at from a CCO perspective when you're dealing with volume is ratios. So how many accounts
Mhm.
per CSM? What it sounds like here at this level, it's not only a
Yeah.
one-to-one with yourself, you've got a team that are also embedded within those. So is it fair to say you've got a 2-to-1 in reverse, 3-to-1 in reverse per account?
It's not an exact formula. We don't have a big team of CS, the CSM, the key account director role. What we have is essentially, I've got two what we call key account directors who are very, very experienced, and one of them manages just one account, and it's like, okay, this account is paying us multiple millions of dollars. We're going to make sure that we have somebody thinking about them 100% of their time every day. I have another who is working on similar kinds of accounts, but with maybe 3 accounts. And that's more because those particular accounts are in a more mature and stable place, but they still need that level of high touch. And then I have a couple of CSMs that are working on, 4 or 5 accounts each. So that math probably didn't add up, but we've got a we've got a couple in process and in flux and things. But generally it's like 2 different levels where it's that ratio has generally worked okay, where I might have somebody on, like our average, our smaller accounts are still paying us, 300,000 $400,000 a year. I might have somebody that has 5 or 6
Yeah.
of those, whereas the ones that are multi-million, I'm going to have, one person spending, no less than like a third of their time
And
on them.
how are the problems different from the buyer's perspective? In a world where you've got 20 customers and they're all high yield customers versus that volume,
Mhm.
what are the similarities between those different cohorts and where are they distinctly different?
I think that it's all about ROI. It's all about value whenever you're buying anything, right? So in our space, this product has the clearest ROI of any that I've ever supported, because essentially we're saving these companies millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions in some cases in wasted inventory, and just making them more productive. And there's a very clear view into how effective that is. And because we're able to go super deep, we're spending lots of time having that conversation and making sure that they understand the value that they're getting from our product. Usually when I've been in, sort of the higher volume situations, you'll usually look at it as more of a convenience tool, something that's going to, okay, my team likes to use this. It makes them a little more productive, but it's a little harder to measure. And maybe the customer's not even thinking about it as much. The other thing is like when a customer is investing millions of dollars in a solution, they're putting significant resources into it on their side. So when you have the high volume situation, high volume, lower dollar value, you typically have people where it's very much a part-time job for them, and they're not sitting there thinking about your solution every day, and they're not necessarily even it's a really big deal if you're paying a company millions of dollars for a solution. Like we need to show up and make sure we're proving our value every single day, whereas if they're paying, and sorry, I'm talking in dollars, and you're probably wanting
No,
me talking in
dollars
pounds.
is fine. Dollars is fine.
But generally, when you get these like more point solutions, or just something that is not as systemically ingrained in their operation, getting their attention is harder, right? So in a way, I mean, what I do today in this kind of environment is certainly challenging, and there's a lot of pressure, but in a lot of ways it's easier because you have the customer's attention. They really want to make sure that this big investment that they've made is paying off, and you've got full-time people thinking about it all the time on the client side. So yeah, they'll take your call. They'll spend some time with you. They'll show up at the QBR. They'll help. They'll want to hear our perspective on what value they're getting, what's next and what else we can do for them. Whereas if it's a smaller solution, I had that issue at the last company where, just getting the right people, the right stakeholders in the room to pay attention was a huge challenge. And you end up spending way more time on the tactical stuff in those high volume situations where you're talking about bugs and you're talking about tickets and I don't want to talk to you about strategy until you fix bug number 5674. And so this is much more interesting and it's more fun, honestly. So I feel good about that.
Obviously, revenue is the key driver within most organizations, and I get that. But from a metrics perspective, is there any of those similarities from the volume space that comes into your work today? So a lot of organizations will measure NRR and GRR and the NPS score and the CSAT. Is that still within your world when you're managing such a small number of customers, even though their value is super high?
It is. The primary focus is always, just really gross retention. But NRR is important, and it's certainly part of the equation. Some of it is the stage that we're in. So we took a huge investment about a year and a half ago, and that's when they started bringing on a leadership team of, seasoned guys that, have white beards like me and have been doing this for a long time. And a lot of the focus in the last, year and a half has been on building out the scalable structure, becoming more product led, just changing a lot of the motion that we're doing. And in doing that, my focus has been a lot on stabilizing the contracts that we have. So we've had a number of contracts that we're just on 1-year auto renews, and I don't like that myself. My board doesn't like it. So a lot of my focus has been actually on, what can I do to incentivize you to go on a longer term deal so that we can secure that. And then from there, really start focusing on the growth part. So it's a little bit of a journey for us. We absolutely want to grow like everybody else within these accounts. And there's a ton of value there. But my primary focus has been on the retention side, which, you measure in customer sat, and you measure in NPS, and you measure in, I have a metric that I have the team use. We have like a normalized set of descriptors that are all about ROI maturity. Do they know what ROI they're getting? Can they explain it to us? Have they accepted it? Are we on a path? Do we have a plan? All of that. So little bit different, a little bit more microscopic that we're digging into, but the goals are ultimately the same.
Yeah, no, it makes
Does that make
a
sense?
ton of sense. And it's good that you look at it's horses for courses to a degree, right? You've got your fundamental metrics that everybody tends to measure against. But what it sounds like is you've built another model,
Sure.
which is that ROI maturity model specifically for your business.
Yeah.
Without going into trade secrets, are there any levers within there that other people that are thinking about how can I measure my customer success organization, that you might be able to give a pointer or two on those ROI maturity metrics without getting too granular into proprietary information?
Ye- Yeah, I mean, it's really part of the strategy here is, so when I got here, my first board meeting, I was sort of fed by the team that I inherited, I was fed a spreadsheet that had, here's a list of customers, are they red, yellow, or green? Okay, great. How do I look at that? How do we determine that? Well, they seem green, they seem red, they seem yellow, whatever. Most of them people told me seem green, and they, later on they weren't. But ultimately, a lot of what I'm talking about is essentially saying like, all right, let's create a health score that it's and the health score is important as an aggregate, but I like to inspect and interrogate the components of the health score. So I look at things like this ROI maturity. I'll get to that in a second. Product adoption, advocacy, engagement, contract stability, platform adoption, and then I give them a list of things that they need to choose from. So contract stability, are they within 6 months of the contract? Is there of the renewal? Is there any friction? So there's a number of things. I should have had them ready to read off to you, but like essentially, pick from a list of how you describe this customer. So it's not like a finger in the air, I think they're feeling this way. So on ROI maturity, it's more about like, have we established a clear measures of ROI with this customer? And if it's like, no, they don't have any, yes, they have it, but we haven't started implementing it. The third level might be, they're somewhere along the journey. A fourth one is they fully are aware and they can describe it. And the fifth one might be, they're getting significant ROI and they're able to share it with. These aren't exactly the way we do it, right? But now that gets fed by some of the mechanics of what we do. We've implemented this. The function that we perform is thought of as field inventory management. So we have a services offering called a field inventory, a FIM assessment. So the FIM assessment takes like our experts. We do a deep dive with our clients and sometimes with our prospects. It's a services engagement basically, where we will go in and we will go deep into their organization and look for opportunities to create value for them. And we're doing it pre-sale in most of our sales engagements now, so that we can define like, okay, when you work with us, this is what you can expect for ROI. And I love when we do that now, because once I get them as a client, and it's my team, that's the services part of my team is doing that. But once I get them as a client, now my CSMs have a map, and they know, okay, we said we were going to save them $100 million if they come on board with us. How are we doing? Right. So, and then what we're doing is because this is a relatively new service that we've been offering, we're retrofitting that into some of our existing accounts where, I think this is the same with every customer, every company. You've got a customer that's been around for 5-6 years. Nobody really knew why they bought it, or nobody really like quantified it. Now let's start quantifying it. So going in and doing these now gives us more opportunity to say, hey, how can we do more with you? How can we, where are we today? Let's set the guidepost. Let's constantly be, working on something together, so you get more and more value. So all of that feeds this measurement that I'm talking about, where you have different levels to measure where they're at in that journey.
It's really interesting, and obviously the theme of this podcast is the outside seat, and what we mean by that is it's from the customer's perspective. Sometimes we're not invited into the room when they're making decisions, or they thinking about technology and they're thinking about the services that they're engaging. When you're going through that level of detail with that client, how much of that is client led in terms of these are the things that we absolutely need, versus your company's perspective and you're trying to get the customer to be malleable towards you, versus the customer wanting you to be more malleable towards them? How does that work with your setup?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that's another place where it's going to differ between the high volume and the low volume customer, the high value, higher ARR customers, and the lower. In our case, what we found is we are able to lead it quite well. And part of it is we have kind of a unique solution. There's really not a lot out there that does what we do. And we're typically replacing something homegrown that's doing some of what we do, or, somebody knows that they need one of these FIM systems, but they're not quite sure all the aspects of it and where they can save. And in some cases, we will have a customer, maybe a large global customer that says, hey, we need something like this, but we're going to need to sell it within our organization. And we partner together to sell it within the organization by us going in and really leading. So we're spending a lot of time coming to the table with, and a lot of this is like, as I've been here and, we've been putting some new motions in place. We're doing things that we've always done to some level, but we're operationalizing it and we're making it repeatable. And it's not just like, let's figure out what we're going to do with these guys. And maybe we'll do something like we did with that other one. Now we've got a whole operational way to do it, right? So I would say quite a bit we're leading it. And the hardest part for our sales team is just to get them to say, yeah, I'm gonna sign up for this little services engagement. But what we've seen is the results are very, very impactful. And of course, the end result of this is, of course, the punchline is going to be, well, we can help you solve all these problems. But even if they decide not to buy from us, we're able to highlight quite a bit of
Yeah.
opportunity within their organization that the customers find a lot of value in. And I think that's where, in the higher volume, lower ARR situations, again, you don't have as much of their attention. And I think those situations, in my experience, have inherently been more customer led, where they say, okay, these are my problems I'm trying to solve. Why don't you come and tell me how you're going to solve my exact problems? And I'm going to tell you what your solution should be. And you have to like fight hard to get to like, what's the actual problem you're trying to solve and what input can we have? And can we get you to think about it differently? I think we're a bit blessed in that we're able to come to the table as experts and really say that, we know how to guide you to think about this differently, and we get their
Yeah.
attention
And I'm
generally.
assuming that's that institutional knowledge that you've gathered. It's not you've just thought it up. This is years of working with these customers to be
No.
able to tailor
Yeah,
to the customer's requirements.
absolutely.
Very good.
Yeah, absolutely. What's neat about I love coming into a company at the stage that this one is, and I've done it several times, but like I'm not an entrepreneur. I admire those guys, nothing stops them. They can do absolutely anything. The inventors, the people that, take all the risks and build these things. I like coming in, 10, 15 years in and saying, okay, now let's operationalize it. So like I said, there's so much knowledge here, and we have these amazing experts that have been doing great things for customers for a long time and have gathered up all this information. And one of the things I tell my team and we talk about a lot is we have more knowledge of this problem and how to solve it than anyone in the world because of all this experience we've got. Now it's a matter of, how do you make this a repeatable thing? How do you make this something that's that's not too onerous and too heavy a lift for the customer to participate in these projects with us.
Yeah, that makes sense. Also, within your intro, you talked about how you've moved within industries. You've not been somebody that's like, I've created a career for myself within this particular industry. You've more created a career for yourself with the type of role, and that's servicing customers. I think there's a misnomer that you have to have tons of experience working within a specific industry to be successful when you move into another industry. How do we dispel that myth here of somebody like yourself who has moved within those different industries and gone from success to success to success because of the skill sets that you are actually delivering? Maybe as part of this narrative, how do you convey that message to the audience that don't be tied down to a specific industry because it's the skill sets that's the more valuable?
Yeah, I love that question. And again, for me, it's been, I mean, some of it is like taking this approach, you open up your options for your career. Certainly, and that's I don't want to pretend that's not been the primary driver. I see an opportunity. Hey, that looks like it's kind of cool. But I also love learning about this new stuff. One of the things that I've found is that when you go to a new industry and you have this fresh outside perspective, and maybe they've only worked with people from their industry, you can bring new ideas that are actually so there's the industry you serve, but then there's also the sort of like, let's call it the customer success industry. I have expertise in the customer success industry, so I come in and I'm applying that expertise that should be relatively the same from I keep saying the word industry, but from from one audience to the next. When I earlier in my career, I had primarily been in the HR space, HR staffing space, and I moved over to pharma, and I was working for a company called Phase Forward that did clinical trials for very large pharma companies. Later got acquired by Oracle. When I went into that company, everyone there in in CS type roles had just grown up in the industry, and not even in software. So they knew a lot about the industry, but they didn't really know about they had never seen the outside perspective of like all the stuff that I'd been paying attention to. And I'm not trying to pump myself up there. It's just it was an advantage for me that I had seen this other stuff, because now I look like a superstar. I can come in and I can introduce these ideas that they just hadn't done because they grew up organically. I'm seeing that here to some extent where everyone at the company, we're kind of coming out of that startup phase. We have so many people that are deep industry experts that know so much, and they're so good at talking to customers about solving their problems. Now I come in and, I don't know a lot of the stuff, and I'm probably never going to know it at the level that, some of the other folks that have been here a while can do. But as I've needed to stand up a scalable operation, like I'm a big fan of specialization. So, when I came in, I looked at this and I said, wow, these guys give really, really good customer service. We've got this great service orientation. We've got this great culture around knowing how to solve the customer's problems, not so structured on things like project management and centralized support and making sure we have consistency in how we're meeting SLAs, and even the rhythm around customer success management. We have very scattered around how we're doing QBRs and measuring value and all of that. So what my very intentional approach was to bring in not only myself, but some other people who had outside experience, not necessarily from the space we're in, who can stand up. I brought in a guy that could stand up a proper centralized support operation, and somebody else who knows professional services really well. And then what I do is kind of focus the experts that have been here for a long time that are so damn valuable to us. And I say, hey, you don't have to worry about like managing meetings and all the follow-up notes and all that stuff that project management needs to do. You don't have to worry about, chasing every ticket that comes in, because other people are going to do that stuff. We're just going to use you for the stuff that you excel at, which is this, this bonding with the client over their business needs. And it's a more team approach. That's another place where being in this like lower volume, high value I feel the model I've put in place here works really well here because you can afford to do it. I'm a customer who's paying you $10 million dollars a year they're expecting a team. They're expecting a group of people to come in. So I don't sweat too much like that. I don't know as deeply as a lot of the people here, the end result of the product. My job becomes more about making sure we've got the right people doing the right jobs and breaking up those jobs and working efficiently and working as a team.
Now, before we continue, a word from today's sponsor, Flourish. Most businesses don't underperform because they can't hire or don't invest in training. They underperform because the two things never talk to each other. Hiring happens over here, development happens over there, and somewhere in the middle, invariably performance breaks down. Flourish fixes that. They're an award-winning go-to-market talent partner working across early career SDR hiring, senior sales talent, and practical training that drives real, measurable results and not just activity. I've personally worked with their managing director, Sarah Skelton, for almost 20 years, so I know how they operate. They stay invested through the full journey and not just the placement. If you're looking to build a commercial team that actually performs, Flourish is where I would start. Find them at helloflourish.com. In sales, in life. Makes a lot of sense. What you're talking about here a lot is that operationalizing the motion, the support, the customer success, that customer service. In a scenario where, by your own admission, you've gone to an organization where customer service is actually really strong, it is all of these other factors that you've had to build on top of that. So you've got good foundations, you've built on top of that, whether it's PM, support, rigor around the rhythm of business where it comes to things like QBRs. Going into other organizations, what is the And you've worked for founders, you've worked for first-time leaders, first-time CEOs. What is the thing that they get wrong more often than not, that maybe it's a free bit of consulting here from Ted, do this and you're going to fix a big percentage of the problems that you're going to have?
Oh, that's a great question. There's lots of answers to that one. I think generally it's kind of related to what I just said. I think it's really about the folks that are in those types of sort of states in their careers focus so hard on the product itself and the buttons you push and what are the cool things we can do with the product to make it do this and that. I'd say focusing as early as you can. I mean, the part of the maturity here is getting to that business value on the client side and thinking about, you got to get to think about the customer's perspective and what they're trying to do with their business that your product can achieve, and not your founders and early stage CEOs and stuff. They fall in love with their product, and it's not about the product at all. It's about the business solution. And I feel like this is kind of common. It's that whole story of like, I don't need a drill, I need a hole in the wall kind of thing. But I do think if you can fairly early on identify what is the value your product is going to get to these customers without even talking about the product, what's the value, what's the ROI, how are we going to measure it, and get that into the conversation in the sales process, have it flow into the conversation in your CS process or whatever you're calling that, as you're taking care of the customers, that you don't typically see in the kind of, less mature organizations. I think that's the stuff that typically needs to be installed later. And I think if you install it earlier, you get stickier with the clients and you get a clearer vision and roadmap and kind of North Star on what you're trying to
That makes a
achieve.
ton of sense. And if we look back at your career, I mean, it sounds like today you are predominantly North America. Is that fair?
Yes, predominantly. We have many of our customers have operations outside of the states where we do service, but the folks that we
Okay.
work with are based in North
And through
America.
your
Yeah.
career, you've led global organizations, whether they are in Europe,
Hmm.
APJ, and the Latin America, etc.
Sure.
From your perspective,
Hmm.
what is the difference of supporting customers within the US versus some of these other regions? What's that one or two things that a CS leader should be thinking about when they are scaling internationally?
Yeah, that's a good one. The cultural differences are very real, and I think one of the things that I think about as a U.S. leader when I am in one of those situations, I don't want to sound like a turncoat to my compatriots, here in the U.S., but we tend to be a bit arrogant. We tend to be a bit, the U.S. is the center of the universe, right? And I really think you need to be humble. I think you need to listen. I think you need to have some emotional intelligence to it and really understand. There's a tendency in the States to say, well, okay, that group over there, we just need to get them on board with the way we do it in the States. And that's not how it works. They don't care about how we do it in the States. They have their own thing that they need to get done. So really digging into like, what are the unique cultural needs? Even things like, I learned this early in my career. The first time I did a big project, this was 100 years ago. I had a very big engagement with a very large customer that was based out of Switzerland. And what I learned was we had been used to standing up our product in a sort of rudimentary way, and I was introduced to the notion of like, form over function and the need for like very, very deep project planning and rich risk registers and project charters. And without that, I remember I would participate in the sales process. And, I showed up with my usual stuff. Here's some slides. Here's the 5 steps we're going to take. Da, da, da. And they're like, where's all this other stuff? And I had to learn very quickly. And we sold that deal and we adapted and we got there. But there is there's different expectations. Another thing, the story I like to tell. I was working when I was at Oracle Health Sciences. I had a colleague who was in Germany and he was an engineer and we were building something, and we used to joke that like his approach was to make it absolutely perfect before it went out the door. And I'm the American cowboy and I'm gonna just, throw it over the wall, knowing that it's got some problems, figure out what the problems are, fix them later. It's the cowboy thing, right? So, and I'm not saying like you have to totally adapt to, if you're a US company and you're working with a German company, you're not going to completely change everything you do. But at the same time, you need to be aware of that stuff, and you need to like, okay, we better build in a little more time for QA. We need better build in a little more time for some of these structural elements that are tied to the culture and the expectations of that region. And so I think it just takes some stepping back, some investing, some learning and research around, what are the nuances, what are the differences for
Yeah,
this
I
region.
think some of that only comes through experience. It comes through the 25
Yeah.
years of working within those different dynamics and
Hmm.
understanding what the buyer's experience
Sure.
is, whether it's in Germany or France versus the UK versus Latin America versus the US. You use the terminology of cowboy, and what I hear
Hmm.
from that is firefighter. We're going to give you the product, and then when a fire springs up, we're going to put that fire out, and we're going to make you happy that way, rather than right from the start putting the solution in place that the customer is actually thinking this is awesome from day one.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting
Yeah.
dynamic.
I'm glad you brought up the firefighting thing, because that's been a thing that I've been saying where I am, where, again, we have an amazingly talented team that has figured out how to support these giant clients all along without somebody like me, right? And some of my other colleagues that are starting to do things a little more software industry specific. But we've got these amazing firefighters. And but one of the things I say is like, I've generally found that people that are good at fighting fires are also good at lighting them. Um, and but it's kind of boring. Like, what I'm trying to do is get us to boring. I'm trying to get us to a place where we don't have these fires to fight. We just have, this is how we expect to do it. We're gonna put some structure in place and some process in place, and we're gonna know what we're expecting going in, and we're gonna set, and some of that means, a lot of that is just customer management. It's expectations with the customers, and some of it's like it supports all the people that need to deliver within the company. If I've got my team lined up to really set good expectations that, no, it takes us this amount of time to get this thing done, or it costs this much to get this thing done. Because if you don't set that up in the beginning, you're gonna be lighting fires, and then, yeah, you're good at putting them out. It's fun, it's exhilarating, but that doesn't scale particularly well.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And what that does, it introduces a lot of stress across the business, because if everybody's in firefight
Hmm.
mode, then yeah, those stress levels start to increase, especially as some of the fires continue to burn and you're not being able to pull them out in a timely manner. So whether that's internally or with a customer, if something's on fire within a customer, figuratively speaking, of course, then you've got a greater risk from a churn perspective. You've got a greater risk from the scoring mechanism, the engagement that you might have from them. They start to look
Yeah.
elsewhere for a solution that is promised to be a little bit more in line with what they're looking
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, I saw this a little bit when I first came on board. You have I'll be mixing metaphors here, or I'm gonna get off the firefighting metaphor, but we had the situation. I've seen this in many places where you put all of your resources into whatever's like burn. Okay, I'm still on a fire, right? Whatever's burning the hottest. Okay, everybody run to that side of the ship, right? And now the ship starts tipping in this direction, and, oh, we pissed off somebody else over on this side. Oh, right, everybody around over there, and you need to find a way to like create this balance, because it's not just about that one customer who's upset that day. You want to get out of that situation where it's like, okay, who are we going to help today? Well, I think we can probably ignore that one for a little while because they're not yelling right now. You can't be doing that as a long-term strategy. You've got to get to the point where it scales, because you're setting the right expectations, you've got the right process. You're not expending all this energy on the firefighting stuff. So that's an important aspect of all of this, particularly as again, my focus is very much operational, just putting everything on the rails so that
Yeah,
you can scale.
awesome. Really appreciate it. I could talk to you for hours and hours, and we have done over the years.
Thank you.
Um, So we have a tradition on this podcast where we ask 5 rapid fire questions. So let's jump straight into those. If we look at the one tool in your GTM stack that you cannot live without.
I would have answered this question differently a couple of years ago. I will say, like, I need a CRM specifically for the CS function. I mean, that answer is persistent. I will say that in the past, I have gone out and bought, there's a product called Client Success that I like a lot. I had Plan Hat that I implemented at the company that we work together at, things like Churn Zero, Gainsight, all of that. But I think products that are very specific to that are really good. I'll be honest with you, I haven't implemented that where I'm at because, again, we have such a small number of clients. What I did instead was I sort of tricked out Salesforce to, do most of the things that I needed to do. I think long term, what I'm doing right now is I'm taking a little time to evaluate like where AI is going and what AI can do to help. And I've been actually talking to a couple of cool companies that are doing some entrepreneurial stuff with AI around CS. So I'll get there and get to, that type of a solution. But generally, I want something that's not just like the Salesforce sales solution. It's specific to, managing these client relationships, pulling in all the signals from the different aspects. And that's really important to me to have, whatever it is. I care less about the tool itself and more about the function that it's trying to serve, which kind of goes back to what I was saying before, from a
It
buyer
makes a lot of
perspective.
sense. The one recommendation, if you're not already engaged, Elias Torres over at Agency, they've created a specific AI solution specifically for CS. And in my previous company, we looked at that. It looked really, really interesting. So I'd encourage you to go and look at that. I'll send you a link afterwards. Elias Torres is his name. Um,
Okay.
second
Sounds great.
question: the biggest GTM myth that you would like to kill off.
The idea that like land and expand sells itself, that, you just kind of, you pop a product in and of course they're going to use more of it. And, going back to a lot of what I said here today, you have to guide them. You have to put people in front of them, that you have to have the conversation. You have to, point out people don't pay attention to the ROI that they're getting, why it's important. They may do the thing where they go, oh, we have some more users we need to throw on here. But, if there's more opportunity with, additional divisions or additional parts of the product, you've got to guide them there. And there's, I would say just as much work in that on the CS side as there is in, it's different kind of work, right? In some ways, but it's ultimately selling, but it's selling from a standpoint of, being the business partner to the client ongoing, and making sure that they're getting the value and they're seeing the value. So there's definitely a lot of
Very
work in
good.
there.
What's the metric you look at first thing on a Monday morning?
So I think generally it's I tend to look at all these things that I've been talking about, this customer health tracking that I do. But if I were to boil that, bring that to a higher level, it's like, where do I have customers that are stuck? And, in stuck meaning, is there risk to retention? Do they not understand the value they're getting? Are we not high enough in the organization? So that reporting that I talked about, where I've sort of forced the team into this rating system. Now, I'll be honest with you, that the nature of your question is like every week I'm looking at it. I do look at it every week, but it's not necessarily changing from week to week. But it's a way of grounding myself against like, okay, where are my priorities? What do I need to be thinking about? Who do I need to chase? Oh yeah, we've got this customer whose contract stability rating is a 1. I better go chase and see where we're at with that. Or, their ROI maturity is at a 2. Okay, what are we doing about that? Let me go look at the account plans that we have in place. And it leads me to other things that we're doing by, grounding me in this dashboard.
That's really interesting. I think there's a whole podcast episode that we could dig into that.
Yeah.
Which GTM or self-help book or business book do you always go back to, and why?
I don't, I don't know that. Well, I guess to some extent, there was a book that was introduced to me last year. I'm a very people focused leader. I'm big into like interactions between people and culture and how people work together. I was introduced to a book. It's a Lencioni book. Everybody knows Lencioni, but it's a, one of the newer ones, I believe. It's the 6 Types of Working Genius, and it basically breaks down your areas of genius, competency, and frustration. So out of 6 categories, what gives you energy, and where where you have genius, what are you competent at, and then what frustrates you, right? So it's wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, tenacity. And what I like about that is it makes me think about like, okay, I know I'm a galvanizing guy. I'm a discernment guy. I'm not like wonder and invention frustrate me. So even as I've said earlier, like I admire the inventors and the innovators, and I've worked with some awesome ones, and I love coming in and being a counterbalance to that. But I know like I'm not the guy who's going to go invent something. I'm the guy who's going to stabilize it and operationalize it. And this is just an example for me personally. But if I look at that across the team and across the dynamics, particularly when my approach is to build teams and build specializations and get them all working together, that book and that approach has helped me to sort of articulate and ground the way I'm doing all of that and see where I've got some friction points between people, and then help them to understand where there's value in each one of them and in their colleagues.
Awesome. And who is the most underrated person in your professional network that more people should really know about?
I've got this guy that's he's a friend and a former colleague. His name's Russ Mikowski. We work together at Smashfly. He's been a CRO and a CEO. He takes a really holistic view of the business. So he's a people focused guy. What I like about Russ is like he came into a company with me early on in his time, and we had to make a bunch of changes. And he had decided he was going to change the way we were doing our inside sales operation. And he had to let all these kids go. And I sat in with him because I had a little responsibility for the people part of the operation. And I just loved the way he approached that conversation, because these are young guys. They've been in they haven't been out in the workforce very long. This is the first time they've dealt with something like this. They're losing their jobs. But he took such care in that conversation, and he offered to help them, and he did help them. And I got a lot of respect from him from that. But then also just we've stayed in touch over the years, and he's got a great network. He's got really, really good experience. And I've been able to, call on him for a number of things, and we've connected on a number of different, kind of networking needs over the years. So I've got to give him the nod.
Great. Shout out to Russ Mikowski. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. The clarity of thought, the clarity of execution, the people-related nature of what you do. If somebody was to say to me, here are all of the components of TED, and if I was to guess there for what type of work would he be doing, it would be this. It would be customer facing, engaging with customers. And the clarity of thought today is the clarity of thought that I've seen in action with customers. You don't overpromise and then under-deliver. You're a straight shooter, and you deliver what you say you're going to deliver. And when you're not being able to deliver that, you own it and you go and speak to customers. I've seen that in action firsthand. I'm delighted
Thank you.
to call you a friend, and I really appreciate you taking the time today on the outside seat. Until next time, we'll see you in the next episode. That's
Thanks,
it,
Mike.
mate. I really appreciate that. Your buyers are still sitting in that outside seat. Subscribe on YouTube, follow on Apple or Spotify, drop a like and a follow. It genuinely means the world as we keep growing this channel. And if today's conversation sparked a question or a thought, leave it in the comments. Every month I answer your questions in a dedicated episode, and the best ones might just end up on Instagram, LinkedIn or TikTok. Your question could be the next conversation that we have. This episode was brought to you by Flourish. Find them at helloflourish.com. We'll see you next time with a brand new guest in the outside seat.